Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our discussion forum. I'm glad to say it's our last discussion forum because we are covering our last topic for the course. And I'm just going to welcome everyone and have Michelle take over. For those who don't know me, I am Furupero Tambani, and I'm the NSCF Science Communication Specialist. And yeah, welcome. So let's go to the next slide and just go through some guidelines. So we need you to please keep your contributions helpful and considerate of everyone in this room. So that's the hosts, the panelists, and all the participants. So whatever that you say, whether audibly or on the chat, please make sure that it's considerate of everyone. And use the chat box to say hello. You can do this right away. So just say where you are coming from and just a greeting. So it is our tradition to get into a space and greet. That's what makes us African. And then you can add your questions on the chat also. I will keep an eye on the chat just to make sure that all your questions are covered and answered. We have some people that are going to be panelists or that are going to share. And as they speak, whatever question you have, you can just put it on the chat and we'll have them answered after everyone has spoken. If we don't have time to answer your questions, we'll make sure that we answer them on the recording. And we have plus or minus an hour dedicated just to discussions. So this is a discussion forum. We expect everyone to speak, to share, to discuss, and not just sit and watch. We want people to engage. So please feel free to engage. You can either start a conversation or a discussion or engage in one that is already started. So feel free. Now I will hand over to Michelle. Michelle will also just let us know who our panelists are. Michelle?
Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our last discussion forum. So what we're going to be covering today, we're just going to go through the main points about collection management and curation planning. So last week we had the webinar and we went into a lot of detail about planning. And today I'm just going to really cover the main points, just to refresh people's memory or for people who weren't at the webinar last week. And then we're going to find out how things work in reality. So it's all very well to have theory about planning, but what's happening on the ground with the people who are actually managing collections. And so I've got a list of questions, and Pietro Murray from the ARC has agreed to answer, and Nikisha Singh from Skapuza. I didn't see Nikisha on the list of participants earlier, so hopefully she will be joining us. But if there are other people who are willing to also step in and answer questions, then I would be very happy about that. They don't have to answer all of them. So when we get to that section, I will also invite other people who are at the discussion forum today to join in answering some of those questions. And then we're going to have a breakout room session. So we'll divide into groups and have discussions on some of the key questions, and then come back into plenary and not get full reports, but just ask for input. Okay, so Christina will join us. Thanks, Christina. I didn't actually pick up the message, but that's great. Thanks very much. So we'll just look at what stood out from your groups, what you learned from your group, And then we're just going to, Nikisha is, okay, great. Thanks, Nikisha. We're going to just have a quick look at what assignment 14 is going to be. So this is the last assignment for the course. And we'll just go through that quickly. All right, so we've got quite a lot that's going to be happening today. I hope we're not going to be load shedding, yeah. So hopefully we won't be hit too hard by load shedding or by people's connection, including my own. Okay, so let's move on. I see there are more people to be part of the panel, and that's great. What we'll do is when we come to that section, we'll just assemble our panel. Okay, so just a refresher. So what management is, it's clarification of goals and priorities. It's associated strategic planning. So once you know your goal and your priorities, then you plan. And then you develop necessary monitoring systems. And you also need some form of leadership to drive the implementation. So what we said is that when we talk about collections management, are these 4 different steps or aspects of management included. That was the main thing we were talking about last week in the webinar. So just to refresh on the main steps in planning for the collections. So do you know what needs to be done in your collections? I think that's the first step, is understanding what work needs to be done. And that can be identified through assessments. So an assessment of what documentation you should have and what you do have and where the gaps are. The health and safety assessment and what mitigation actions or structures need to be put in place. The risks to the collection. So there's an assessment that looks at the 10 agents of deterioration and the different levels of enclosure. So from the building to the room, to the cabinets, to the containers. So you can identify where the risks are. And then there's also the standards for wet and dry collections that we covered. So you can identify what's not right. And then the potential disasters, mitigation and response. So what do you still need to do to get everything in place for disaster management? And then data capture. So looking at what hasn't been captured yet, what hasn't been quality controlled, and whether there's any issues with the data management system, your database. And then looking at things like, are there backlogs in accession? So is there a whole lot of material that hasn't yet been accessioned and incorporated into the collection? Is there material that needs to be de-accessioned and removed from the collection? Are there backlogs in incoming or outgoing loans, and dealing and processing and documenting those? So it's a matter of looking at all these different assessments and seeing what needs to be done. And then the second step is to set your aim and objective for the collections, and you can do it in a 3 or a 5-year time frame. So what is your aim? So where do you want the collection to be in 3 or 5 years' time? So it's quite a high-level, broad statement. So it's not exact specifics. Your objectives are more specific, and they kind of break down what you need to achieve to reach your aim or your high-level goal. So you list your aim, you put your aim down, you list your objectives, and you prioritize them. So there may be too much to do or things that are too expensive and you won't be able to do them. So, but some of them are just things that have to be done. So you list your objectives in order of priority from most important to least important. And from all the assessments, you can come up with a list of everything that you need to do. You draw up a table and you list those actions that need to be done. Some of them will be a once-off intervention, so something you put in place once and then it's done. Others will be routine things that have to be done regularly. And you put them under the relevant objective. You end up with your objective and then your actions that need to be done under the objective. And then you set your target. So the target can be 100% of specimens captured in the database, or it can be, that you're going to do 50,000 specimens captured in the database, or it can be frequency. So it can be topping up ethanol or checking ethanol levels every 3 months. So you've got to set some kind of a target. And then you go through your list and you look at which ones are feasible given the resources that you have. So there's no point in coming up with a plan that you will never be able to implement because you don't have the staff, or you don't have the budget, or you don't have the equipment. So you have to look at which of these actions are actually feasible in terms of budget and staff and time. And then you can break up the actions and targets into yearly plans. So you might want to take those actions that are not feasible and put them in a separate section and not put them in your plan. So don't throw them out because at some point things might change. So you just put them separately. So that's why I said just park them somewhere, but you don't try and do things that are impossible. And then you've got a plan for implementing all of these actions that you've come up with. And so you have to identify who will be involved. So which staff will be involved? What are the time frames? So by when will you have it done or meet your target? How much time will the staff have to spend? So you might have a staff member who's not going to be working on that action 100%, but they might need to spend 3 weeks of the year on doing that. And so you have to figure all of that out. And then figure out what will be needed. So equipment and consumables. So that might be a density meter for measuring ethanol concentration, or it could be glass bottles or new lids or sticky traps for pest monitoring. So all the things you're going to need have to go into your plan. And then you have to do some costing. So you know how much it's going to cost. So that'll be your implementation plan, and you can work on an annual basis. So in 1 year, what are you going to be doing? Who's going to do it? What do you need? How much is it going to cost? And then you have to take that and put it into people's performance agreements or work plans. So everyone knows this is what I have to achieve in the year. And this is when I must have it done by, and this is how much time has been allocated for me to do it. That's the only way to really make sure that a plan gets implemented, is by giving individual staff responsibility. Okay, and then once it's being implemented, then you have to monitor the progress. So it's not advisable to just give people work to do and then leave it and come back at the end of the year and see how they've done. There has to be some monitoring and recording of progress. So check on progress if you manage other staff, or if it's yourself, just you on your own, just keep a record of your progress against your actions. Identify any obstacles and see what needs to be done to overcome these. So often it'll be something that the individual staff can't fix on their own, but maybe together, or maybe management needs to get involved to help unblock obstacles. And then the plan will need to be reviewed. So maybe on a 6-monthly basis to review the plan. Some things might need to be shifted around, but don't change the plan because you're not making progress. So then don't start pushing your targets and pushing things out because you're just not working on them. Sometimes there's unexpected things that happen, and so you might need to shift things around, but there must be a very good reason for changing your plan. And I think it's monitoring progress, reviewing, helping to sort out obstacles. It needs lots of engagement. So if you work in a team in a big institution and there's different levels of management, then there should be lots of talking and discussing and looking and figuring things out together. So it's real teamwork. And if you work on your own, like I think quite a lot of people do, then it's a matter of reflection. So don't just keep going blindly, but take time to actually reflect on how you're going, whether you're going to meet your targets, and what you might need to do differently if you can see you're not making any progress. So that's the basic steps. I mean, obviously, it can be very complicated if you have multiple collections. It can be quite challenging. But it can also be quite simple if you just have one collection and you just decide you're going to just do a plan for that collection. Okay, so this might all be new. I don't know. I don't know how many institutions or collection managers or individuals work like this. You might already do it, but you might not. You might just continue doing the same work, you know, that you've always done, and it kind of maintains the collection, and, you know, just do what you can on a daily basis without really a clear plan. So, you know, I don't know, but maybe we do need to change the way we think about curation and collection management so that it is proper management. About how we decide what to do and who will do it. So if one collection is really struggling and has a crisis, maybe the staff from another collection come and help, not sit and watch that crisis because it's not their responsibility. So it might be a different way of thinking about how we allocate people. It's also maybe a different way of allocating budget. So I know in a lot of institutions, the budget is set. It's the same every year, year after year, and it gets split up in the same way. And you do what you can with what you get. You don't say we have to do this big project, so we're going to take budget away from other collections and put it all here to get this done. So it might mean looking at budget differently and looking at how staff performance is managed. So instead of just having the same performance agreement year after year, where it's just some kind of targets put in there and people just work sort of blindly, maybe the way we manage staff and staff performance needs to change. So all of this is really important for professionalizing collection management and curation in South Africa. So a lot of the practices that we have and the way we work dates back from 1920, 1890, and it hasn't really changed, and it's now 2022, nearly 2023. So maybe we need to have more of a professional way about management. And we need to think about it. So if there are problems with the collections and staffing and gaps and challenges, if we just keep doing things in the same way, will it change the current situation? So if we want to be better, we have to actually change the way we think, the way we operate, the way we allocate time and budget. So I know change is hard. I know that we've had a lot of sessions about change and the difficulties, but sometimes it's just got to happen to move forward and to do things in a better, different way. So now we're going to go to our panel, and I'm very happy that we've got extra panel members. So the questions are here. And we want to know there's no right, there's no wrong answer. We just want you to share with the others how you think about things. And so I will ask the questions, and we'll have the panel members put on their cameras if they can. And then we won't ask all the panel members all 10 questions. I'll ask who wants to answer a particular question. So if we can have, so I know it was Petru, from the ARC was one of our panel members, and then Nikisha from Skukuza, and then Christina Potgieter-Curry from Hughes Herbarium at UKZN, and then Roger Bowles from SIBE. Is there anybody else? So there's Christina, there's Petru, Nikisha, Roger. There we go, there's Roger. Okay, great. Any other volunteers? Anybody else want to be part of the panel? You're very welcome. Okay, you'll get a chance to talk in when we have the breakout rooms. Okay, so we've got quite a mixture of collections here. We've got herbaria, fish, the reference collection, and Pitu, you manage the arachnology collection at the ARC. Okay, so the first question is, what kind of plan do you have for the collections? So let's get some input. We'll start with Petru, with you. What kind of plan do you have for managing and curation?
Hi, everybody. Yes, we in the biosystematics division, there is a plan, annual plan, that addresses some collection management tasks which would be in alignment with the ARC's strategic plan and biosystematics strategic plan. So it's basic ones like database migration, GRAP 103 activities, and then utilization of the collections tasks that goes with that. Personally, I have a annual plan that I sort of revisit every 6 months just to review it and to realign what has shifted in importance during the 6-month period.
Okay, thanks, Petru. All right, interesting. Christina, do you want to go next?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, nothing on paper, I'm afraid. I think we're one of those collections where, you know, we few staff and we all do a lot of different things. And I think I'm embarrassed to say the plans are in our heads, actually. It's not that we don't meet and plan, but as Petru says, things do change as priorities change during the year. So we have kind of like 2 schedules. We have an annual the sort of schedule of things that have to happen routinely to keep things going. And then we have special projects that kind of layer over that. And the timing for those are obviously different. But to be honest, it's not set in stone. It's not written down. We discuss it. I work very closely with the curator and our assistant and whoever else is helping with projects. And we just manage to go along. So we definitely a collection that could benefit from writing plans down more. But the reality is that the plans really just, they happen and we manage them, but they're not formally recognized. We do have performance management where things are reported and so on. And I must say that the NECF quarterly reports have been quite useful to help. I mean, we have in the past had sort of yearly reports that we've had to do as well. But yeah, on a planning process, we probably fall short in actually recording and you know, doing it on paper. But it does happen.
Okay, thanks, Christina. So I think that's actually probably the normal situation for most.
So that's why it's been quite good for us to be made a lot more aware of it. And we, you know, so we of course all hope to change the way we do things. Well, I don't think we'll change the way we do things, but we'll change the way we report and plan, perhaps.
So you know, it's also fine when you've got staff who've been there for a long time and know things backwards and know the collection very well and what needs to be done. It's when staff turn over, I think that then it becomes.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think we're lucky in collections on a whole that we do seem to retain our staff for a fairly long time, in some positions anyway. But
okay,
it doesn't
thanks.
Help, when people leave.
Roger, do you want to come in on that question about planning?
Yeah, so we don't actually produce annual management plans for the collections, but we get sort of forced into into doing that from other spheres. So Angus needs a report and a plan, a 5-year plan for the NRF. So over the years, we have produced those, but we're not doing it for ourselves so much. And I think, having had discussions with Nati yesterday, I think we recognize that actually we should be doing this. So I think your prompt is a good one, and I think we're gonna instigate this from now on. Having said that, as Christina mentioned, quite a few of us have been here for a long time, and it's sort of internalized. It's in our heads what we need to be doing, and all of those plans get worked into annual performance agreements and then into performance assessments. So we have monthly curation meetings and weekly workflow work meetings. So it all gets captured, I think, in those sorts of things. But I think an overarching annual plan rolling over every year would be a good thing. And we've got one in place right now, but it's because we were forced into doing it, really. So yeah, so I think it's a good thing to do. And we wouldn't mind having help as well. That was the other thing that we discussed yesterday, is that, I think one of your questions is how could you help? And I think having somebody from outside come and overview what we plan to do would be quite helpful, actually, because sometimes you get mixed up in your own affairs and you don't actually really see all the issues necessarily. So having an outside person helping you do that plan would be pretty good, actually. And it could be anybody, really, any experienced collection manager or curator.
Okay, thanks, Roger. So now you three are all very experienced and you've been there for a very long time, but Nikisha is relatively new in her post. So let's hear from her, Nikisha, and she took over from someone who'd been for many, many years.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My apologies, my video is not working because with the load shedding just ending, our network connectivity is a bit bad. So I am still quite new to curation. It'll only be my second year in December at the reference collection. So it's been quite a learning curve for me, and it has been quite challenging as well in terms of drawing up plans and such. We don't have an actual plan, annual plan down on paper, as Christina and other colleagues have mentioned. But what I did start doing when I first started was draw up progress reports. So I would do a progress report and I would put down at least my goals for that specific month. And at the end of the month, I would report back and, my progress on a certain task or whether it be it monitoring or project that we're working on or data cleaning. I would have like specific small tasks for each month. But I think going forward, it's going to be very beneficial to have an annual plan in place to know what we're going to be doing forward. With bigger projects such as our digitisation next year, trying to get funding for more equipment, storage, etc. So I think going forward, we do need to put the smaller plans in place and just basically combine all together to make it into a bigger plan, so that the goals are more clear, if that makes sense. Yeah, Kruger does have an annual strategic plan, and our goals do align with their goals or objectives, be it biodiversity monitoring, the data management part, because they use a lot of our data, a lot of researchers and such use our checklists and data. So the goals do align, but I think us having that annual plan in place would be, or having it more clearly defined, will assist us going forward next year.
Okay, all right, thanks, Nikisha. All right, so I think we've covered the second question, so I'm going to go on to the third and fourth, and you can answer it in any sort of way. So what are the main challenges planning for the collections, and what are the biggest challenges for implementing any plan? So what are the challenges that you face when you're planning and when you trying to do something specific to implement the plan, even if that plan is in your head. So Petra, let's start with you.
I felt the main challenges at the moment for us here at Biosystematics in the ARC. There's other collections in the ARC as well, so I'm just talking on behalf of Biosystematics, is that we have 5 collections that historically were curated in vastly different ways. So there's no centralization of how it's done. Everybody did it their own way. They did it well, but it was done in their own way. So there's no centralization or a similar way of doing things. And then also trying to align, because we're a research institute, we're not museums, but because we're a research institute, emphasis on work are mainly on research. So it's always a bit tricky to try and align collection curation activities with what the outputs are required from us doing research in the institution. And then the main challenges for implementing for me would be the fact that there's no centralization of the workflows at the moment. And also, I don't know if it's a resistance to change or just a fear of losing control over the collections that these people were working in for quite a number of years. That's it.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah, interesting. Okay. All right. Christina, challenges?
I think for us, I mean, I'm loath to say staffing and funding because we all have those problems. But for us, whatever plans we make, we need to keep in mind our staffing. So we have enough staff to keep the basic collection going and to look after it. But for any extra plans, we do need more staff. So if I look back, and this was unplanned, I suppose, over the last 20 odd years that I've been here, to get extra stuff done, we've had to jump whenever there's an external funding opportunity or the like. Be it when we were doing the African Plants Initiative, when we scanned all the types of plants, you know, the NECF type funding, FBIP projects. To get extra stuff done, we've had to jump at external funding, and we've sometimes had to put aside what we may really want to be doing and rather do that because there's funding for it at that time. So that means that it's pretty haphazard, but it also means that you have to be flexible. Otherwise, all you're going to do is just look after your basic collection, which is our primary job, and we do that. But for anything else and extra, especially major changes and the like, we do rely on extra staffing, and that means extra funding. The truth is we're not actually allocated a budget from the university. We do have a cost center where we spend money, but we've never, and despite us asking, we've never been told this is your budget for the year. So yes, our salaries are paid and our basic equipment, our basic needs are met. But if we want to make a major project that involves a major financial contribution, we'd have to ask for it specifically quite long in advance. And we've actually found it's actually easier just to get externally funded where possible. So yeah, it's a bit awkward, but I think you just have to then you have to always look for opportunity and keep going. And perhaps that's why we haven't had these formal plans in a way, because it kind of, the basics stay very similar every year, and it's the extra work and the externally funded projects. And those all come with their own timelines and their own reportings anyway. Things like biogaps and biogaps we jumped and made sure that we did what we could for that, for example. So for us, it's been more a case of just having to jump when we can and being prepared to put in applications and make the most of what comes our way. And that's how we've managed to increase our collection footprint. We've managed to increase how many cupboards we have lately, those orphan collections that we've incorporated, and that will all help in future to make us more relevant here. But without those external inputs, that wouldn't have happened. So yeah, that's kind of where we are at.
Thanks, Christina. So I think that that's also probably something that's quite common, is that curators actually don't know what their budget is. It's kind of, you ask for things and you know you can't ask for a lot, but you don't know how much you've got. It's like a pot that someone else manages, give you little bits. So I think that that's quite common. And then the issue about the holistic approach, taking opportunities when they come, I think that's also okay. Great, thanks. So Roger, do you want to talk about challenges quickly?
Yeah, so I'm not sure whether you're talking about 3 and 4, but 3, we don't really think we have very many challenges. We've got quite good management structures in place in SIAB. We have quarterly research meetings, quarterly management meetings. We've got monthly curation meetings and weekly sort of workflow meetings, and we have ad hoc meetings between all of us. We've got quite good staff complement, so we're probably luckier than most in that respect. So we think we're fairly well organised in terms of planning, but we do have other challenges with regards to implementation of various things. I don't know whether you want to cover that now.
Yeah, I think so, Roger. Yeah, if you can talk about what are the main challenges of implementing.
So in terms of challenges, one of the biggest things is the complicated nature of cataloguing work. You know, when I first joined SIAB, we would just get a bottle of fish and we would just plug in the coordinate details and the date and the collector, and that was it. It would go onto the shelf. But now we have tissues that have to be linked, photographs, lots of other data. It's so much more complicated putting a record into Specify now than it used to be, and so there's quite a backlog of work. Very often all of those bits and pieces don't come into us at one time, so we can get the collection in, but maybe not all the data comes in quite as we want it, and maybe the photographs don't come in, so we can very often get parts of the job done. And then the individual scientist might be a visitor, they might leave and they say, we'll send it to you later. And so many of these collections drag on for quite long periods of time. And that's a continuing challenge. I'm not sure we have an answer to that, but it's definitely an issue for us. Obviously, SCM processes are becoming more and more complicated. General bureaucracy, reporting is a real, it's unavoidable, but it drags us away from doing other curatorial work. And then finally, permitting and GRAP 103 compliance. Those are major challenges. We haven't had to deal with GRAP 103, but I'm preparing for it. And permitting is a constant issue. I've just got a series of permits for a single tissue loan. This is a 2 millimeter vial. It's taken me 4 months to get it. So I had to get Saharis permits because it's a holotype. It's a tissue from a holotype. I've had to get TOPS permits. I've had to get a CITES permit. And it's just, quite honestly, it's a nightmare. And I think, yeah, I don't know what can be done about that. I don't probably can't do anything about it. We probably just got to get on and do it. But I think those are the only major challenges in terms of implementations.
Thank you. Thanks for that. So I think that some of those will also be common across different collections. And it's interesting that despite having more technology, it's more difficult to capture records because the expectation is so much higher now. Okay, Nikisha, do you want to talk about your challenges with planning or with implementing?
Okay, thank you. I think one of our biggest challenges right now is the availability of funding. major projects have been planned for next year and going forward, but getting the funding to get the equipment, I think that is our biggest challenge at the moment, because we don't have your basic equipment such as your temperature loggers or humidity loggers, equipment to test ethanol levels and such. So I think right now our biggest challenge is securing funding to get that equipment in place, which counts as basic care of the collection. Yeah, so that's one of my challenges and my priorities right now, is to be able to secure that funding for next year.
Okay, all right, thanks. And that, I'm sure, is also a big that a lot of institutions do face. They don't have funding. Okay, so thanks for talking about the challenges. I'm going to just combine question 5, 6, and 7. So just to talk about priorities. So how do you decide, or what are your priorities? So this is like the one thing that you have to do. How do you pick it, and what is it? So let's start with Pietro.
Okay, to prioritize is basically, I try and align my plan with my performance agreement, because I mean that is handed down from top structure. So I have to comply to certain things, and I try as much as possible to align a collection management type plan into that. Yeah, I think for myself and for pie in the sky, I would think sometimes, for biosystematics would be to have specify as a collection management system in biosystematics for the next 5 years, or in 5 years' time. And then also in conjunction with that, have verified comprehensive inventories of the collections at biosystematics. For the NCA, for the arachnid collection, mainly the same. And then also for the year, it's just because I'm busy with the migration to specify. So to complete that, implementing the manual, like 80%, 1 or 2 things would probably not be done. And then to work hopefully through 50% of my backlog. Yes.
Thank you for that. So yeah, that's great. Thanks. Christina?
I'd say for the next year, we have 2 priorities. The one falls mostly on me, and that is getting a lot of our NSCF documentation in place to actually formalize the way we do things. And the other thing is, since we've now nearly completed the incorporation of our 3rd orphan collection, I've already once done, during lockdown, I came in after hours and did a reorganization of the collection to make space in relevant areas. And now that all the specimens are in, it is a squeeze in certain areas. And we've also moved out our seaweed collection into a separate room. And so that's actually opened up more space. So there needs to be one more major reorganization of our collection to actually make sure that we have space everywhere for future expansion. And then we need to relabel all our cupboards and the like. So that's a physical thing that needs to happen in the next year. And that kind of is because we've had all these projects. And then we'll be on a good footing for the next while. Personally, for me, in the next 5 years, Pietro, I can't deal with half our backlog in 1 year, but I plan over the next 5 years to get rid of backlogs. There are a number of areas in the collection that, well, sort of in storage, that have been ignored for since even before my time. And I've just decided if that's my legacy, to get rid of those things and to sort what needs to be sorted and put into the collection what needs to go in. That's what I'm personally going to be focusing on to get done. And I think that's something that will be very useful. Unfortunately, it's a kind of thing that's not easy to give to contract staff, because there's often what I'm going through at the moment, every box is different and you have to make decisions as you go along, and they have to be quite rational and educated decisions, if I can put it that way. So it is time consuming, but that's what we are planning here. But for us, it's a consolidation as well after the orphan collections, which we're very grateful that we've had the funding to incorporate. So yeah, that's where we are at.
All right, great. So yeah, priorities, possibly big work to reorganize a collection of that size. And everybody has their backlogs, those things that you just don't want to deal with, because you're going to have to make hard decisions and it's not going to be simple. And it's going to eat your time. Okay, thanks, Christina. Roger?
Thanks. Okay, so our 1 year sort of target is to complete the compacting shelving, the work that's been funded by NSCF in our upper collections floor. And then after that, movement of specimens into that space. That's really quite a considerable amount of work. It's going to make a lot of space in our lower floor. At the moment, we've got many families that are completely congested and there's no space. So that's a major target for us. We're also hoping to complete a loan system that will be an online system where people can check on progress of loans, and we will be able to prioritize work on loan requests. I'm hoping that's going to be done in the next quarter, actually. And then also for me personally, I've got to make sure that we are GRAP 103 compliant, mostly with our SOPs in place. And then, over the rest of the year as well, we are also hoping to have 2 of our contract staff work on imaging our type collection. So that's for the year. It's quite a lot, but I think we can probably do that. And then in terms of our 5-year goals, that's a little bit more vague, but generally we've got a couple of orphan collections that we want to target. I'm hoping that we're going to get the Penn State USA cichlid collection, which is a huge collection that will literally double our cichlid holdings, and it will put us on the map as far as Lake Malawi fishes are concerned. And we're also hoping to get John Fisser's amphibian collection, and I think the herps are going to go. The other herps are going to go to Bloemfontein, and it would be good to get those in and to get them all catalogued and on the shelves. And then also progress on both the tunicate and our cephalopod collections. We have those, and it's just getting our curators in once a year or twice a year to actually come and sort through and identify material and just make progress on those 2 collections. They are going ahead, but it would be good to see 5 years of work and get them well organized. I think those are really our main targets.
All right, thanks, Roger. Lots of work. And Nikisha?
Okay, in terms of priorities, the last 2 months or so, going into December, I've just been organizing the collection a bit, organizing our storerooms, removing some old archival material, that needs to go into a specific storeroom. So I think that's one of my priorities right now, is just to reorganize everything and know where each specimen is, and get that information, the storage information, down and onto our database as well. And the second priority for next year is the digitization of our herbarium specimens. So we have secured some equipment for that. So January going onwards, we do want to start with that project. And one of the third, I have a third priority as well. It's basically improving our funding, basically getting our collection out there, and so that people know that we do have a collection here in Kruger. I think if that does happen, more funding, external funding might be available, and to improve the facility for educational outreach and educational programs and so on. Yeah.
Okay, all right, thanks. Also busy. I think it's really good for us to see the thinking around priorities and for people to have their priorities and work away at them. Okay, so I'm going to, in the interest of time, I'm going to just skip to the last question then. If you could wish for one thing to help you with planning and management, what would it be? So Roger's already given us one idea, external help, but what else would help you to plan and implement and manage implementation and achieve those priorities? Pietru.
I think for me personally here in biosystematics, it would be to sort of have the post of collection manager or collection technicians. We don't have specific posts that speak to that activity. So it's always sort of a add on to some other posts, which sort of makes the time available quite scarce. So for me, it would, I think it would be helpful if we can create posts that speaks directly to collection management in biosystematics.
Okay, thanks, Pietru.
I haven't really given this much thought, but I must say, in this process has already made me just think about it more and be more aware. So I think sometimes I don't want to say having a template, but in some ways what you've provided in the overview is very useful. And I think we just need to be made more aware of it. I'm not saying we need a big workshop on it or the like, but it would be quite nice to go somewhere and click on a link and get ideas for how to organize your plans and what should really be done in an ideal world, to be reminded of that. And then one can take what you're doing anyway and put it in that format. So as much as we hate it, actually documenting all these things is a good idea. I'm very grateful to the NSCF for that. So for me, it's more just a case of having the tools to be able to, and getting the ideas of how other people do it, and also just, because clearly not many of us are doing it the way it should be done. So getting some templates and tools is, I think, would be very useful for us, because we're doing this stuff anyway, but ordering it and stuff. It's always nice to have a template that you can work from for things like that. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Christina. And yeah, maybe, in a year's time, we have another discussion forum and people can show us their plans and talk about how they develop them and how they use them. So I think we are right at the beginning of the process. Roger?
Yeah, I sort of I concur with Christina in that this has prompted us to think a lot more about how we do things. And Nati and I have already agreed that we're going to do a proper annual plan every year. But as I mentioned earlier, having a bit of help, and it could just be one external person overseeing what we do, would be really handy. And I think in that process, that's furthering the skills of the person who comes from outside as well, because then they see another collection, how they work, and it transfers back to their institution. And I think we all gain, actually.
Right, thanks. So I think that is something, we could also help each other with reviewing plans. So looking at each other's plan and giving input, sharing. So that's a good idea. Okay, Nikisha, your one wish?
I think right now, as Christina and Roger have mentioned as well, with the assistance of the NSCF, we've had so many tools and helpful workshop webinars, the manual assistance with implementation of the manual. So I think that has assisted me greatly in planning ahead and planning for the museum and the herbarium with projects, and just basic things that we need to start implementing, whether it's recording or monitoring of pest control, to getting the equipment, storage equipment that is according to certain standards. So at the moment, I think that has been very useful. And yeah, I mean, if we have more tools going forward, that would be great. So that's I think the only thing for now.
Okay, all right, thanks. So hopefully assignment 14 will provide some form of a template. We'll talk about that later. Okay, so I think that was very interesting. I don't know if there's anything any of you would like to add from the panel. If there's any question that we didn't answer and that you really want to give input on. No? Okay. So there was that one about what falls off the list of actions or targets in most years. And I assume that's the backlog in annexation specimens. Yeah. That cupboard that you just don't want to open. Yeah. Okay. All right. So thank you very much to our panel members. I hope others learned a lot from it. It's very interesting to hear about the reality. Ah, there Roger says finishing SOPs. Yeah, that's another one. Okay, so thank you to you. Very good to hear from you. Let's just see in the chat. So I think there was let's just see. So Dean from Bola said pretty much the same as Christina described. So that you know what's going on in the collection. It's not documented, but you know what you have to do. Getting vouchers and data and images all together for new collections can be a challenge. So yeah, it's becoming more and more complex when you're managing the digital aspects of the collection now. Daniela says thank you. Some valuable points. Yeah. So you're welcome to keep comments coming, or if you've got any questions for the panelists, you can put them into the chat box. So thanks again. So now we're going to break into groups and have more discussion with each other so that we can get everybody's voices in. And let's go to the next slide. So we're going to have 25 minutes for group discussion. And these are the questions that you can discuss. What stood out for you from the question and answer session that we've just had? What stood out for you? And then for you to think about what are your priorities. So obviously the 4 people who've just been talking, they can let the others have a say. What are their priorities for 2023 in the collection? What are the obstacles that you will need to overcome to achieve those priorities? And then what would need to change for your institution to develop a complete collection management or curation plan? So we've heard that no one really has a detailed plan. So what would have to change for your institution to have that plan and implement it? So Chanel's putting the questions in the chat box for us there. You can make a note of it. So we're going to break into groups of 4 or 5. Remember to give everyone a chance to have their say. So be aware of the people who are not saying anything. Somebody can pull them in, make sure that they have their say. You can select from the questions. You don't have to, not everybody needs to answer all of these. These are just guideline questions. So you can answer only 1 if you like, or you can answer 2. And then after 25 minutes, we're going to come back into plenary and we want to know what stood out for you in the group discussion now. So pulling out from your group, or what was a key learning for you? So something that you learned that you think you'll remember for a long time. So remember that, have your group discussion, let everyone have their say. You don't have to answer all the questions. You don't have to discuss them all. You can pick some of them, 2 of them, 1 of them even. And then when we come back, we'll just put things into the chat box and invite brief feedback. It's not full feedback on what the group discussed. It's just on those 2 points. What stood out and what was the key learning. And that's for you as an individual. Okay, so Chanel, are you?
I've created the rooms. I'll open them now.
Okay. All right, everyone. So join your group, enjoy your discussion, get to know new people maybe. And we'll see you. Chanel will give you a warning when we're getting close.
Michelle, it seems everyone's back now. If you want to continue.
Okay. Thanks, Chanel. So for some reason I can't switch my video on. It says Zoom is unable to detect the camera. So strange. Anyway, I'll just have to work without it. Okay, so I think the groups had their discussion. If people want to put their comment on what stood out for them in the group discussion, so one thing that struck you or was a highlight or a key learning, if you can put that into the chat box. And then if anyone wants to share verbally, you can just put your hand up. Or if you've got any questions that came out of the discussion, you're also welcome to ask those. Okay, Christina.
Thanks, Michelle. What was interesting in the group that I was in, backlogs did feature, and someone actually also distinguished between historical and current backlogs. You know, while you've got historical backlogs, some people also have current specimens that are coming in that are also piling up, and there's a feeling that those should perhaps be dealt with separately, which was interesting. And there was a fair amount of discussion about imaging and databasing, and how scientific curation could actually be falling behind with this whole focus on databasing, which feeds into the overall comment that I have, is that there seems to be more and more recognition that most collections, once we have our collections databased and digitized, we need ongoing management of those databases by dedicated staff, and that there's perhaps not an understanding within institutions of how complicated that actually can get. That's throwing a bit of money towards a few undergrads helping you with scanning specimens or photographing is not really enough. And I know in our case, it's going to be very difficult for us to motivate for a permanent database person who also understands collection management, but that's really what we need. And I think many institutions need that. Many collections need it. So we were wondering if perhaps there could be some advocacy at the NSCF level where the need for these posts could perhaps be publicized within our institutions, or somehow be summarized as to why institutions might need that. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe the 2 or 3 of us that thought it was a good idea were the only ones, but I suspect most people could do with dedicated data managers, and not just having collections managers having to add that to their skill set and not doing it well. And I think it needs to come at a level where actually it can make a difference. If someone came and told my head of school that this is an essential part for a collection of our size, it might carry a bit more weight than us nagging about it.
Yeah.
So that's it. And I know we've mentioned that sort of thing before, but we're not saying we want the post from NSCF, but perhaps the background to why those posts are essential needs to start coming out.
Yeah, thanks. So I think that there's some good points there. So I think that that's the issue about you know, you start doing imaging and data capture and working on that, and then the day-to-day kind of caring for the collections can be neglected. And that's really that's why you need that plan that includes your routine things that have to happen on a day-to-day basis, so that those don't get neglected because you're trying to do something else. And it is a matter of prioritizing. So, you know, if you've got very limited staff, then, you know, you have to be able to do the day-to-day caring for the collections. And it might be that you can't get to the imaging or databasing. Those might become the special projects where you have to get extra staff in to do them and raise funding for that. So I think that is why that's the importance of careful planning. And then, yeah, the issue about the data management, I think it is something, and that's what I was saying about the way we operate. It's still, you know, it's an old way of staffing collections and an old way of doing things. And data has become like a critical issue. And so, you know, it might not be adding a new post, but it might be reprioritizing, saying we're not going to fill that post when it becomes vacant with the same person we had in 1920. We're now going to have a data management. It is a profession, and it is something that shouldn't be tagged on. But it's difficult to find people with the right skill set, because they do need to understand something about collections. Okay, so some good points coming up there. I'm looking in the chat. I don't know, there's lots of people still need to give some input in the chat. Anybody else want to raise anything from your groups? No, I suspect people are hungry now. We're getting close to lunchtime. Okay. So if there's nothing else, I just hope that it was useful for you to sit in a group and share. And like Seshni says there, we face similar obstacles, which is comforting in a sense. So sometimes it is good to know that other people are dealing with the same challenges as you and suffering or making the same kind of decisions as you. So it's always good to know that you're not there on your own. Roger says having a data management manager has transformed SIBE's operations. It's an essential post for us. So yeah, I think that is something that is very important. And Christina, your point about can we lobby, can we do something about it? I think it is something that can come up in the coordinating committee. Maybe it'll be something that comes out of the collections assessment that we're going to be doing next year. You know, we will be looking at data management, and it might come out as a critical need. Okay, so if there's nothing else here, then I think we can move on to the last slide, which is about the assignments. So this is for the people doing the course, but even for the people not doing the course, there was a request for some kind of tool or template. And we will have that as part of assignment 14. So it will be made accessible on the NSCF website, and anyone can use it for a guide. So assignment 14 is about developing a 3-year plan broken into annual plans for the collection that covers only the risks to the collection. So your plan could be much broader. But we just, as an exercise, what we're saying is let's focus on one collection to keep it simple, and then just to focus on the risks to the collection. So it's not going to have health and safety issues. It can have data management in, because that's part of the disassociation risk. But it'll include, the priorities are to look at storage, climate control, fire, pests, dust, dirt, other contaminants, light, drying out, labels, specimen data, backlogs in accessions and deaccessions. So if you have to deal with that, use the assessments you've done in previous assignments to identify the needs or activities. And then think about your aim, your objectives, your target, who, when, and what is needed. And then you're going to include information on what can be monitored. So how will we know what progress is being made? What will you look at to see what progress is being made? What will you be tracking? So there'll be a template and guidelines on the website and circulated to everyone. It can be done as a group or as an individual. So we do know that there are several groups doing all the assignments together, and I think that's a good way of tackling these things. Just make sure everyone does contribute, and it's not all one person having to do all the work. But hopefully, yeah, that template is something that may be useful for people not doing the course who want to think about doing a collection management and curation plan. Okay, so I think that's going to be all for today. We will be circulating the tutorials. We're going to be running a series, I think it's 7 or 8 tutorials over the next 2, maybe 3 weeks. And that's for people who want to get some input on the different assignments starting from number 7. So number 7, 8, 9, 10. Actually, I don't think there is a number 7. I must just check with Ian. He ran webinar 7, which was on the data. But definitely 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So we'll be going through those assignments, and there's an opportunity to ask questions if you're unsure about anything. And then we'll also have a tutorial on how to put your portfolio together for your final submission. So we'll be circulating the dates and times for those. So Fulu has confirmed that there's no assignment number 7. So Ian might put one out there, but otherwise there will only be 13, unlucky 13 assignments. Okay, so I think we can close for today. Thank you very much for joining us, and thanks very much to our panel members again, to Roger, Petru, Nikisha, and Christina. It was very useful to have real on-the-ground input on how people are actually working. So thanks, and for the people who won't be attending the tutorials, that'll be it for the year, and we'll set up some kind of sessions going forward. We want to still continue with our community of practice for collection management and curation, to continue sharing and learning from each other. So we'll come back to you next year with our plans going forward. But for the people doing the course, you've got the tutorials. You'll have lots of work with your assignments if they're not up to date. And for the final submission of your portfolio, which will be at the end of February. And thanks to Fulu and Chanel for organizing and setting up everything for us today. All right, enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, everybody. Bye.